me just remind you, my shit is just a little bit out of bounds in this motherfucker, you feel me? Yeah.
All right, welcome to another episode of Studies in the Fifth Dimension. We're continuing with this Tie Creek Vortex site. And so right now we're just going to get into working with non-physical realities and begin to show you the science behind what this reality is. And then we're going to tie that around into the Access Mundi and the Solomon's Temple connection and give you the understanding as a whole as to what we are working with, what we are situated in, what we are projecting into, what our minds are currently focused in. So perception is far more dynamic than most people give it credit. We all think that everyone sees and understands the way we do without realizing there are 7 billion different perceptual levels on this planet. Some are very similar to our own, but most people outside our culture see things through different belief systems than our own. One's culture being one of the most impressionable parts of how we see things and interpret what we have just witnessed. The ancient peoples did not see things the way modern people do, and the only way to understand them would be to become them. In other words, the only way to understand the ancient sites is to ask the originators of the site. As said before, this can be accomplished through the non-physical states, as time has no relevance on this level. Even through this process, the results fall under the filter system of one of the performing the inquiries. An example of this channeling of all the channelers out there, I doubt that more than one or two are proficient enough to be accurate to 75% of the information that is being delivered through them. Another example of this is the angle of observation. If a researcher is using an out-of-body experience or remote viewing to do research on, say, the makeup of the universe, there is still an interpretation involved. This interpretation is reliant on what angle or view of the completed system they are visualizing. Below is a diagram demonstrating this. If your filter system is set up only to see certain profiles of vibration, then you will only see that level. Everyone has different levels of vibration because that is what makes us unique. And it is because these differences that break the visions down into interpretations. In the diagram below, if a person of a higher vibration and only interested in higher vibrational levels of universal structure, then that will be all they see, which is the color red in the diagram. If that same person focuses down on the lower vibrational level, then they will start to focus on the geometric aspect, only the blue. It also depends on the level a person can achieve and to what levels they are interested in. To focus on all the levels, one has to adjust their levels up and asking the same question with gaps in time throughout year and over years of constantly shift back and forth within their range of vibration. Rechecking information is a good way to verify its consistency. All right. So everything is energy. Everything vibrates at different frequencies. The only reason one thing is different from another thing is because there are energies and frequencies which are at different rates. Now, the only reason I'm using this site, y'all, is because this gives a very complete view and understanding of what the fuck I'm talking about. I have been there. I go to the fifth dimension regularly. I talk with gods. I deal with spirits. I go to the fourth dimension and astral travel regularly. I do this. There's not much that I can learn in the physical reality anymore. The rest of my journey is spiritual. So now all I could do is get back. But this site is literally, it's a complete understanding. So this is why I use this, and this is why I come. Anybody who asks me, I tell them to go here for reference. The Tie Creek Vortex site. All right. So source energy is all that is. It starts with an injection of energy into a non-physical point of light, riding on a harmonic pulse. The light and harmonics that he refers to are not what you would understand in our physical reality. Physical light and sound are products of sensory perception, and source energy is not physical in any interpretation. This harmonic pulse expands out in a 360-degree pattern from source injection points as it enters into its new reality. Energy flows in and out through these points as it expands into an unresisted sweep of the 360-degree isotropic range, only to flow back into its source point. As the 360-degree wave of energy or harmonic thrust reaches boundaries of adjacent point expansions, it is deflected back to its source, as seen below. Non-physical points of light. Light flows outward, bends back on itself, creates a sphere. Okay. The initial injection results in a wave or a harmonic movement that creates a spherical wave field. The harmonic spheres continue outward, reaching their limits at the edge or the edges of adjacent spheres, creating walls. It is at this point that the motion outward is impeded and a new reflected inward movement is created. This new movement creates a different vibrational level and thus a new flavor of the original flow. As seen below, the boundaries or walls are created as spheres, compact to fill in available spaces. Okay. This expansion results in boundaries that are a mixture of each of the participating spheres' individual vibration. The result of this mixture is the creation of a new structure called the cube. The cube shape is more than an abstract static shape, as it is composed of fields of moving energy, which creates a lattice structure of common frequency. Below is an actual electron image of a strontium atom showing the injection points and a cube shape. Okay. All of the structural elements from the initial portholes, injection points, to the most complex aspects have flowing energy. This flow is possible because it is instigated by need to find balance or neutrality. Unbalanced energy flows back to its source, all to find balance. Likewise, energy is seen flowing out. The two opposite flows of inward and outward energy creates an equal balanced flow along their paths. As each porthole injects outward too, it receives inbound energy. The opposite directions of flow support themselves by wrapping around each other, creating a harmonic, multi-directional balance. This wrapping or twisting around each other creates a helix shape, as seen in the photos below. Okay. Helix shape. This one's a little bit better. Helix shape. And likewise, oh shoot, okay. The two photos on the left are Hans Jenny harmonics, with the top one showing a helix from the one side, and the photo below this showing the lines on one end. They are pairs working together in a rotation of a clock and counter clock spirals. The photo to the right is an actual celestial photo showing this helix formation. In photos, one can see opposite flows creating rotating helix pairs of energy. Each pair, as an individual, is called a string. This helix flow is one of the most basic harmonic structures that Hans Jenny has recorded. In Jenny's photo above, the lycopodium powder can be seen vibrating into a helix. The right side photo is a celestial object. The top celestial photos shown above are more examples of spiraling energy. His teaching sources all call these flows strings. Advanced formations of the strings are called ribbons. So once again, let's go back through this just so we got it. So helix pairs of energies are called strings. When these strings are stacked on top of each other, these helix pairs, they are called ribbons. And these are composites of many stacked strings, okay? Pictures of celestial ribbons. And then show you how these can be stacked together to create ribbons. So the photo diagram above shows the opposite flow. The opposites must flow through their ribbon structure and in opposite directions for any permanent duration or balance. They do not cross one another in this balanced flow, for this will create interference in a different structure, rendering the end of the ribbon. As the lines of energy come full circle back to the source in the crowded universal field lines, they eventually do cross others. This crossing of path creates a new harmonic pattern called the cube. Okay. 6 wave field boundary plane lines called cubes. All right. So accumulations of energy lines flowing from source creates ribbons that continues to build onto themselves in ever wilder unrestricted whips. That is until they reach the boundaries of other ribbons. It is only here with common vibrational levels that contact can interact or create interferences with one another. Any other strand that is not of the same vibration will be outside the other's reality or resonances, and no interference will be created. As shown in the diagram above, widening lines eventually cross one another, creating a cube that will have its own specific vibratory rate. These cube structures become balanced states of energy of their own and thus are permanent parts of the universal structure. Its composition is still from primal source level of injected energy, and because of this source, it is a balanced static structure. Each cube will have its own specific energy structure or energy signature, as it is a combination of the individual ribbon's energy. What I mean by my prior description of a balanced static structure is entirely dependent on our own perception of time and space. This primal level of creation is measured in billions of Earth years. This does not mean that its time frame has anything to do with our perception or measure of time. It is all about levels of perception, as each level of vibration, regardless of its conscious awareness, will have a different perception of time. In other words, there is no one time frame in the universe, as each individual reality will create its own. Our concept of time existence is simple. Our perception has little to nothing to do with the rest of the universe. So we can understand the cube grid as permanent, but that is only because we are judging it by our own standards of time. Talking about the cube grid, how the ancestors saw the cube grid. The cube. So in Jenny's laboratory, the confines of a container only allowed a slice of what is actually a three-dimensional structure. Future science will need to study this in three-dimensional format. In the Jenny's photos or Jenny's harmonics photos, below you can see the points of energy injection lines of attraction join the points as energy flows back and forth in opposite directions. Section A in the photos is a magnified view of the injection point complete with attached ribbon lines. In section B, I've drawn red lines to show the vertical flow direction of this slice. The third-dimensional cube, the Jenny harmonic, the three-dimensional flow of this structure is a cube. But if seen as a two-dimensional slice, it can be called a grid. In the diagram to the bottom right, I show how this would look in a three-dimensional view. Okay. So showing the grid. And this is what it would look like in the three-dimensional structure. All right, let's go on. To the left in the photo above, one can see the level of vibration in actual creation. The diagram to the right is a basic reminder that the entire universe is a saturation of the basic lattice structure. The scale of these cube structures ascend and descend in size without limits, but within their defined vibrational scales, never mixing but still connected. Cubes can be described as wave fields of space. Wave fields that are products of ribbons of flowing energy, which must eventually cross each on their journeys. As these ribbons cross paths, they create secondary formations from their arching energy. The energy needs to continue its course, but interference deflects some of the energy into a new structure called a sphere. It is within this breaking away from the static grid cube structure that creates a vibrational bed for self-awareness consciousness to enter. Cutting a lot of corners here, it is within the sphere that our level of consciousness is allowed in. This new injection into the structure takes place in the center of each sphere. Each structure, cube and sphere, supports the other, but as said in the beginning comments, it's consciousness that starts it all. It is the sphere level of the structure that our higher level of consciousness is injected into the background, the grid cube structure. While the cube can be referred to as a wave field, the soil, it is within the sphere that our conscious injection takes place, the seed that grows. These cube boundaries or walls are complex forms of consisting of moving energy, a movement that flows in opposite directions, as does everything in the universe. These opposites create balanced states and longevity, as one directional flow would be over practically as soon as it started. After this, we're going to go to creation myths and show in these different creation myths where this information is implanted, basically showing you how all of these mythologies are giving you an understanding of consciousness through the mythology, through symbols. And so, as we keep going, we're dealing with the cube. All right. So, an interesting perspective. In the center image above is a diagram from one of the world's best out-of-body experiences, Robert Bruce. It was a very typical vision of the dimensional grid as you can fly over it in an out-of-body state. These diagrams from his book Astrodynamics and is, in my opinion, one of the best books to purchase if you want to learn this ability. This is how Robert Bruce describes his journey into the layer just above the physical called the astral level. Each astral plane appears two-dimensional when its surface is approached. However, a fully three-dimensional environment is experienced when it is penetrated. The atmosphere above the plane surrounding the projector is faintly color-tinted, as if consisting of thin vapor radiating from the astral plane's surface. The color tint is not apparent when looking directly down from the surface, but can be seen misting all horizons. The corners of each square contain small but distinct dots and splashes of color that look like yellow, green, orange, and red paint. Each of these appears to be an entry point into a specific internal realm or kingdom. In the above diagram, you can see Robert's artistic version of this grid structure. His drawing replicates the harmonic photos of Hans Jenny's. The central flower aspect also shows in the Jenny's photos to the right. Okay. Understand that they are not the same vibration and thus will be different in shape, but you can see the flower's depth and complexity. The diagram to the left is the ancient shamanic diagram from Bates Wells in the Sonora Desert in Arizona. Okay. The same grid structure. All right. So as seen in the harmonic photo below, the crossing points of the ribbons, the corners of the cube are areas of interference and imbalanced states. So once again, we have strings, which are two oppositely flowing energies that wrap around each other. These form together to form ribbons, and in turn, these ribbons form together to create cubes, which create spheres, which in turn create a grid that consciousness can enter to, like a seed enters into soil. Okay. And so, as seen in the harmonic photo below, the crossing points of the ribbons, the corners of the cubes are areas of interference in imbalanced states. As typical imbalance creates another structure, and from this, a different flow pattern. In this level, called the sphere, our spiritual consciousness enters into the cube or static structure of all that is. This is the melding point of us and all that is, the God aspect. In the Jenny harmonic photos below, the grid cube, a two-dimensional slice, shows their common points of energy injections. The grid line ribbons create interference and imbalance forms a new structure inside the cubes. The photo below is a slice of this structure and would have to be viewed in a three-dimensional profile to see the complete form. The outlines of the sphere can be seen overlapping the cube side, as these are interference boundaries from adjacent spheres. The author has drawn in red circles at the bottom to highlight this. So, and then you see the interference in the middle where the diamond is created by all the the cube is created by all the intersecting lines of energy. Okay. All right. Below to the left is a three-dimensional diagram with the Jenny harmonic photo of an isolated sphere. To the right, the sentient consciousness enters the cube grid at the center of the sphere. Okay, as you can see. like birth. As you will see that birth does also mirror this process. All right. As you can see, the sphere has its own movement of flowing energy, and although it is independent of the cube structure, it is also reliant on the cube. Cube and spheres are thus equal, and the relationship is symbiotic. Below are a couple of celestial objects that are true spheres. Most celestial objects called nebulas are not exploding or dying stars, but are actually births. This can be the birth of a new universe to a new galaxy. Due to perceptual filtering, and in time we can only see parts of this birth, as the full sphere and its process is beyond our capacity to see. Okay. Spheres, bubble nebula. All right, so a sphere's main energy flow is called the axis, and its top is referred to as 0 degrees, with the bottom of the axis being 180 degrees. This axis flow is a result of the alignment with the universal structure source, the grain of the universe. The horizontal flow are called 90 degrees flows and are a mixing vortex of natural flows from 0 to 180 degrees. As strings of helix energy spiral down into the universal grid from source, they enter into the individual sphere structures from the top 0 degrees. This energy flows through the axis on its return from source cycle of the universal sphere. All flows must have an opposite, and the axis is not any different. The directional flow of this 0 degree energy is due to the construction of the universe itself. Our universe is a gigantic sphere, and the true origin of the design, its flow is consistent with and to other spheres of its proportion. The ancients knew our universe axis as they referred to it as the tree of life. Okay, the axis mundi. All right, and in other terms, our Earth's position to the 0 degree axis flow is measured from our North Pole and is known to science as the anisotropic angle, which is approximately 19.5 degrees. So now we've just rounded it about with the axis mundi connection, showing you, just pretty much showing you how the ancestors knew this information and put this information literally in their mythology. So let's keep going. Part 2. All right. So the Jenny photo above is only a thin slice of a harmonic, or a harmonic sphere. With the sphere's inner level or inner dimensions are another level of cube spheres that are proportionally sized down. Cubes within cubes and spheres within spheres, as there are no limit to this in either direction of size. So what we are seeing in the harmonic photo is a sphere with the inner chambers or smaller spheres. All structures support the whole, and the whole is a part of the smaller inner structures. The harmonic slice shows 4 spheres, but there are actually 8. In my teaching, they call this structure the 8-pack, as to see the right of the harmonic photo above. The sphere octave, as it sounds, 8 spheres that creates a balanced state and a unity that can create and support the larger sphere's balanced state. This larger sphere can then join or joint several others of equal size to create another 8-pack or octave. This continues on from the infinite beginning to the infinite end. It is only when we get down closer to the physical vibration that imbalance creates new structures. This brings about creation of physical elements. Okay, let's read this one more time. The sphere octave is as it sounds, 8 spheres that creates balanced states and unity that can create and support the larger sphere's balanced states. This larger sphere can then join 7 others of equal size to create another 8-pack or octave. This continues on from the infinite beginning to the infinite end. It is only when we get down to closer to the physical vibration that imbalances create new structures. This brings about the creation of physical elements, imbalances, conflict, duality. Although the spheres create and support outer and inner structures, they are completely different level or dimension from one another. They still influence one another as the main spiral energy flows from one another through the larger orb axis, falling under influences of the inner structure that is on a different level. As above, so below. Due to vibrational separation, all can occupy the same space without interference of creation. All are notes that support the octave of the structure. Okay. And we'll get more into dealing with vibrational levels and as above, so below when we get into dealing with the ISIS thesis. And so, like the outer or larger sphere, the inner 8-pack of spheres are rotating around their specific directions. The movement is not random. This rotation of inner spheres creates currents that affect the whole. Below is a diagram of this flow. Okay. Flows out and up, down and up. Yeah. So consciousness enters the cube sphere structure from the center, coming under influences of the axis flow from the above and below as it creates the inner structure of the 8-pack. So it enters from the center, coming under influences of the axis from the above and below as it creates the inner structure of the 8-pack. The 8-pack's movement and influence of the axis creates an event horizon in the middle of the 8-pack, a black hole. As seen in the central diagram, the energy flowing into the main sphere spirals down until it hits this dividing region of the 8-pack. From there, it continues to spiral outward, but its outward expanding flow is interfered by the larger sphere's shell. This outer shell's movement redirects the spiral and causes it to turn inward along the event horizon, spiraling along the flat plane towards the center. Again, the energy flow now contacts the axis flow, which drags it down into another level below the event horizon. Below the event horizon. It is at this point the energy is free to spiral outward again into its new environment. That is until it hits the main sphere shell once more at the bottom. We're going to read that shit one more time because we're about to get into some really advanced shit. Woo! This is talking about how reality is created. And if you motherfuckers start looking at the shape of this shit, you can realize how much it looks like the drawings of the Axis Mundi. And we're going to talk about dealing with the consciousness of this planet, because what it's telling you is consciousness enters into center. The heart of this planet is consciousness, is a consciousness, it's a mind. We can deal with that on the fifth dimension. So let's keep going. The energy flowing into the main sphere spirals down. Let's restart this whole thing. So 8-pack's movement and the influence of the axis creates an event horizon in the middle of the 8-pack, where consciousness has inserted itself, as seen in the central diagram below. The energy flowing into the main sphere spirals down until it hits its dividing region of the 8-pack. Okay. From there, it continues to spiral outward, but its outward expanding flow is interfered with by the larger sphere's shell. Okay. This outer shell's movement redirects the spiral and causes it to turn inward along the event horizon, spiraling along that flat plane towards the center. Again, the energy flow now contacts the axis flow, which drags it down and into another level. It is at this point the energy is free to spiral outward again into its new environment. That is until it hits the main sphere shell once again at the bottom. And it's showing you the direction. So hits the shell, comes back down, hits the shell, comes back down, and then it creates a toroidal black and white hole. This is what we're dealing with. Okay. And we're going to deal with what the scientists are saying now. They're understanding now, but this is dealing with someone who has gotten this information from spiritual sources. Okay. And so event horizons are a very important part of our physical reality. It is here that elements and galaxies are created, but in another angular level, explained further in this book. In and out of body's journeys, I have traveled down this spiral towards the event horizon. I saw the way that the larger sphere's inner shells and flowing energy deflect the spiral back into a plane. Starting as a wide horizontal spiral on this plane, you gradually spiral inward along it to the center of this plane. Now back to the axis. As you encounter As you encounter the axis, you are dragged down or up depending on the direction of flow. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. Outward horizon, crossover, inward spiral, spiraling up, spiraling down. The event horizon. So down towards the horizon, from the horizon down and out. Petroform is from Woolard, Northumberland, UK. The event horizon is not just one line of interference, it's actually two, as is demonstrated in the picture of an actual galaxy. Above is an example of the event horizontal crossover between two horizons. This produces the typical warped structures that are seen in galaxies. Note, galaxies are not found in the main axis. The point is only to demonstrate this property of horizon creation. I will discuss this further in the book, as this level of structure belongs to the physical level called 45 degrees. Radiation, gravity. The spiral and horizon are the source of radiation and gravity. They are one and the same, but opposites of each other. In the 45-degree section of physical elements, these are two properties that come into our perception as forces of nature. We recognize them as pulling towards the expansion or disintegration of the physical. Horizons are also in three-dimensional or three-directional planes in the main cube sphere structures as seen below. Every form is becoming either a cube or a sphere, or is a section of either one. Complex structures are multiples of spheres of matter surrounded by multiples of cubes of space in multiple fields to the right. The spiral energy described above is not just one strand of energy, it is a ribbon of helix strings that creates a banded flow. This banded flow of energy is called a ribbon. Okay. The spiral is a ribbon or band of energy that is composed of strings of opposite flows of flowing energy. These are the strings that wrap around each other to form a helix, like the DNA shape. The ribbon can be seen in something as common as the aurora borealis, shown in the photo above, up to the right. It can also be seen in the axis of our sphere called Earth or Moon Europa, seen in the photos below. Okay. The ribbon of strings can clearly be seen in a close-up of a Jenny harmonic spheres photo. Seen below, they are tightly layered and not shown in the expanded left diagram. This diagram is only for demonstration purposes. All right. Each layer of the ribbon is a complete and different vibrational level, and then its adjacent neighbor of descending or ascending size. Each ribbon also increases vibration as it closes inward towards the axis. Likewise, the vibration lowers as the spiral ribbon filaments expand away from the axis. Okay. All right, let's go to part 3. In the diagram above, the helix strings form the sphere, but as the sphere energy withdraws further from the grid lines of the cube, the vibration changes. The change of vibration continues to shift to a point that is now in another octave. This new octave mimics the parent sphere, but only at a slightly smaller size. This process continues until there are many layers of the original sphere. These layers are called shells and are part of every structure that form a grid line. Cube to time-space continuums, these new shells are still part of the original but operate at a distinctive layer of vibrational octave. Each layer having properties and flavors of the original but are separate to their own worlds. These shells in a structure are replicated until they can no longer operate in a vibrational tone that can be supported by the original structure. As far as the sphere goes, it is the injection of consciousness into the parent sphere that allows this wider scale of shells. Okay? And then he kind of shows how they begin to cross and inject into each other and create the grid. As seen in the above photo and the Gen's harmonic photo, a basic view, the sphere's boundaries lay outside the cube's boundaries, and thus the spheres come in contact with each other, with two spheres crossing over each other's boundaries. Interference boundaries created at the grid lines. This interference zone will become its own structure and will have its own inherent flow pattern. This zone will also have properties of energies common to the two host spheres. The zone is commonly known as the vesica Pisces, but I have been instructed to call it the patch. As said above, all structures have banded layers or shells. This is due to the harmonic shifts or notes in the octave of every structure. As two adjacent spheres overlap, their shells become immersed into each other's different vibratory flavors. In the universal structure, all forms, regardless of their commonality, will have their own individual signature energies. Therefore, adjacent spheres become co-partners to another structure called a patch. This patch can be seen as one sphere rotates its shells into another rotating sphere. There's a mixing of two different levels of vibration. One sphere's lower outer vibrational shells mix with the inner higher shells of the second sphere. This means the outer lower shells are now co-creating with the higher shells of creation. This creates an incredible amount of energetic exchange as the vibrational states seek to find resonant balance between them. Remember what I said about holograms? Energy in motion has to interact with energy at rest. So higher states of energy interacting with lower states of energy, creating an imbalance, which has to find balance between them. This is also part of the duality of a reality. The union of two orbs is the patch, an area of combined energies and a zone of independent creation that shares vibration from its parents. In the above photos, I've already overlaid two harmonic spheres to demonstrate this. The shells in a sphere would be very close and too fine to show in a Jenny photo. In the diagram to the right, I've outlined this principle. The red arrow in the center would be a neutral energy area. Below is an ancient diagram of the same concept showing different animal levels above and within the shells of the physical and lower worlds. Okay. Bam. Then he shows it with the harmonics. Bam. There we go. Portals through the shells. Physical animals and humans in the reality shell, earth, shells of realities, stacks and orders of people. Okay. The intermixing of different shells create their own dynamic realities, each having its own specific vibration or flavor. In the symbol diagram below, a two-dimensional slice, you can see the many combinations with just a few shells and two spheres. The zone in the middle between 1 and 2 is called the 90 degrees. In this area, there is little movement in the structural creation, for it is too active, and is called a neutral energy zone. Even with this activity, in a conscious level, two spheres intermixing are referred to as two-dimensional levels of reality. The Orb Phenomenon is consciousness vibrating into the edge of physical reality. Okay. Two-dimensional reality explained. The shells are the degree of spheres and are not recognizable as you go inward to the center of the orb or outward to the cube. This is due to the higher or lower vibrations and the lack of any physical form. The shells are banded in concentric layers due to harmonic octaves. Each octave and its composite of notes will have its own specific flavor or vibration. These octave differences will define the boundaries between each shell or band. The outer shells are a composition of many layers of energetic density. There are also many sphere structures that can be observed in astronomical bodies. Most of the nebulas are spheres that are in patches that are displaying different parts of their development. All nebulas have complete sphere structures. It is not always in a vibratory level for our own observation, regardless of instrumentation. Below is a good example of a sphere, a cat nebula, and its shells are concentric shell boundaries. The right side photo shows a celestial close-up of the axis center of a sphere. Okay. All right. Now, the center of this astronomical sphere B shows the characteristic of a true orb in its swirling vortices. In the picture of the upper right, you can compare the core of our harmonic sphere A to the picture in the center of our own galaxy, which is C. The shells are very important to understand, for they explain how an observable effect is only a small aspect of the complete system. Examples of our detectable energies are light, radiation, magnetism, and electricity, and gravity, but they are but small aspects of the same larger energy source, which gravity is dealing with electromagnetivity. So electromagnetivity and gravity are somewhat of the same forces, but you got to delve into that a lot more scientifically, which we can, but that's not what we're here for. So the source energies are unlimited in power and unique, but filtered into their respective dimensional shells in our interpretations. So in truth, physical realities are graduations of vibrational intensities that group through common resonances or octaves. Starting from the original harmonic structure of this universe, there are ever increasing and decreasing layers of energy. All these layers are separated by structural harmonic differences as discussed prior. These are shell boundary areas, and they are separated by vibrational scales. Within the shells are decreasing levels of vibration and individual flavors of this original energy. Each shell is composed of this source energy, but each shell will have its interpretation of this energy. To be in observance of any shell, you must be a part of it. This is only possible if you are that of a similar vibration signature. Each shell will have its octave of energy, and in this octave will be the individual notes of the octave. So each shell could be called an octave scale of the other. Inside each note layer within the parent octave would be another mini octave that breaks down into its individual notes. There are 10 octaves in our physical system, within 5.5 of them being perceivable by us. And the last 4 octaves are mini midtones, each registering its own state of motion. Okay, and one last comment: consciousness has levels or shells also. All right. To the right is a photo of an electron showing the shells. And so between the 8 spheres of an 8-pack is another structure that is a product of the combined balance of the state of these 8 spheres. If you look into the space between the 8 orbs, you'll find a geometric design. This space between all the 8 orbs, you'll find a geometric design known as the octahedron. If you study the crystal forms, you'll be aware that the fact that the octahedron is a development stage of the cube, for they are one and the same, only a small shift out from one another. At this level, the structure of the 8-pack works as a balanced state because the dynamics of pair grouping, for example, 3 spheres would be dynamical and balanced and would be reduced a shift or movement. The movement would take them out of the primary balanced background environment or vibrational level. So this is an ancient diagram of the 8-pack octahedron as seen from a 2-dimensional representation. Below is a diagram showing the 8 spheres removed. What is left is the octahedron. This octahedron is also blessed with the shells, for it's a product of the sphere shells. Each sphere shell will create a different size octahedron structure, which will have its own unique vibrational level. All patterns repeat and are all part of each other. As you can see, the octahedron is situated on the event horizon and passes through its center. Octahedron shells are created by different sphere shells. Each of the 8 facets of the octahedron are a section of one of the 8-pack spheres. As each of the spheres come in closer to each other, they create another octave in the octahedron structure. This is also why the Great Pyramid of Giza has curved sides. It mimics the universal structure for maximum efficiency. Each shell of the sphere creates a different size shell for the octahedron. Sphere banding, pyramid in the center, double-sided pyramid in the center. Another example, Pyramid of Giza, how it's cubed or how it's curved in. Shown above, the octahedron seen in the Gini harmonic photo shows its banded shells in a diagram of the Great Pyramid of Giza with its curved sides. The 45-degree topic is massive and would fill a book, so this book is only here to provide an introduction. The author was told to show the completed system, even if most of the ancient sites do not incorporate all the teachings. Many of the ancient sites have layers of understanding that have been applied to the site by some different shamans. There are also books of knowledge. If one understands the great picture and its internal makeup, also not all ancient shamans saw the necessity to focus on anything that was not of interest to them. Just like the main axis of 0 to 180 degrees, there's a pure source energy that flows into the sphere cube configuration from all 8 of the 45-degree angles. The 45-degree angles are another harmonic level of the universal structure. It is another vibrational dimension below cube and sphere, but is still part of the basic universal structure. Like the 0 to 180-degree axis of the 45-degree angles are another one of the most important angles as seen in ancient site designs. The reason being that these 45-degree angles are the creative source for physical realities. Okay? So shown in the above genie photo are the shells of the octahedron. One can also see the sphere shells being the creator of this banding. The 45 is the electromagnetic angle that energizes the physical world. And this is the first stage towards physical creation. The physical cannot happen without the 0 to 180-degree axis of consciousness, but is the 45-degree angle with supports of the octahedron that creates the elements and galaxies. The 45s are part of a structure that also helps support the octahedron in the center of the 8-pack. Due to the rotational effects of the 8-pack, the 45-degree energies are also spiraling ribbons of different vibrational notes. The 45-degree spiraling, or the 45 spirals are ribbons, much like the 0 to 180 axis is. In the above photo diagram, only one directional flow, the 45, is shown, but in actuality, there are two opposite flows along the same 45-degree angles that radiate outward. Electrical being one flow and magnetism being the opposite and balancing flow, both creating the 45-degree energy axis. The horizontal plane creates the difference between the two flows' characteristics. Shown below in the diagram is this structure. Okay. Creates the same structure through the waves. So shown above are the main flows of ribbons of energy with the event horizon in place at the center. The red nebula in the photo I have placed at the position of its octahedron. This rays of energy in the red nebula from 45 variant angles of the electromagnetic this core electromagnetic energy would not be recognized by our instruments as it is pure source level. It is only when this level is supporting a lower density, the physical realities, that we can measure its electromagnetic abilities. Harmonics. Frequency is 0 to 180 ribbons. Vibration is the 45-degree angles plus or minus degrees. So the above diagram shows the complete ribbon flow, including the 45 overlapping 0 to 180-degree axis ribbon within its multiple influences of the 0 to 180 axis overlapping onto the 45 degrees flow that determines the vibrational flavor of the 45-degree axis and its subdegrees. The bands in the red nebula see below are horizontal planes on the octahedron itself. So go ahead and look at that. And we'll look at that. And so the red rectangle nebula showing how each of these are formed and how we can only see these as visible light in a certain aspect of the spectrum because we're viewing a certain octave based on what octave we're vibrating at. And so the electromagnetic structure is a completely different dimensional level and is a beginning of the physical reality. The hardest part of understanding this work is not to try to see all the different levels and structures at one time. They're all separate structures and different dimensional levels from each other. Although they're independent of adjacent levels, they're still reliant on one another in being complete systems. Trying to see how one level creates or influences another level will only confuse a person. The only way to see and understand it is an out-of-body experience or to go beyond this reality. All right. Electric and magnetic reality in the center, or at the 45. Yeah. So the 45 angular energy is a ribbon flow with an opposite ribbon along its axis. This flow mimics the main 0 to 180 ribbon as the pattern of design is the same, just a different angular flow. Shown below is a diagram of this flow starting at the singular directional flow on the left and then with a complete diagram of them overlapping as they would appear in the true ribbon form. Now, as the two ribbons overlap, they find zones of common but opposite vibrational resonance. Balance in this situation is measured by resonant frequency and is the first stage of creating the physical. This balanced state also has to coordinate with the central octahedron structure. If the electromagnetic is called the energy flow of the physical, then it is the octahedron that is the core of its foundation. In the diagram below, I show how the central octahedron shell crosses the 45 degrees flow. If the octahedron shell crosses the 45 at positions of imbalance, there's no physical creation. There can still be semi-physical realities, but they would be outside of our perceptual range. It is only at the appropriate point that all of the needs come together to create a physical dimension. In the above Jenny photo, I point out that this is where the harmonic structure, the spiral edges A with the octahedron shells B, the possible physical levels fall on the 45 angles at the appropriate octahedron shells. The 45-degree spiral ribbons edges are seen as merely lines in this harmonic slice marked out in blue. Galaxies. In the above diagram shown vertically for convenience, I placed a red figure 8 shown on the inner movement that is created on this level. This is a zone of equal energy vibration from both ribbons. The vibration is matched, and with the octahedron shell, this level's horizon, a flow of energy forms a figure 8. This figure 8 has half of one loop above and below the horizon to complete the 8. It is in this figure 8 disk level, in relationship to the 45-degree angle, that physical elements are created. I will explain more of the figure 8 further in this book. Shown below is a photo diagram which demonstrates the whole structure in its proper angle. It is also important to remember that this is a 45-degree angle and not to be confused with 0 to 180 axis level, as they are two different dimensional levels in this structure. Looking down at a 45 ribbon. Okay. We're dealing with the structure of galaxies, okay? What we can physically see in physical reality. So totally different level of vibration than that of the ribbons in those structures that we were talking about earlier. So ever wonder why galaxies are always at a weird angle and appear to be randomly scattered across the universe? You have to think in a 45-degree angle. If you want them lined up in the anisotropic angle of the universe, it would make sense. That it is if you can separate different size structures from one another in their different vibrational levels. That is also relying on one with the limits of our perception. Not all the 45-degree galaxies and their pattern structures will be observable by our instruments. The patterns will still be there and can still be worked out if one fills in the gaps. Most ancient sites were designed knowing the anisotropic angle of creation, the most efficient source flow. Knowing this angle depended on knowledge or knowing one's position on Earth. Its relevance to this anisotropic angle. This angle is the trunk of the tree of life, and its roots and branches are symbolic of the form of energy lines of the axis. Once you have 0 to 180, it is simple to divide it up into 45-degree angles. From the 45s, you can fine-tune the directions and varying angles you want to download from. The 45s are ribbons, and like the axis ribbons, they too have many varying degrees along their paths. The above diagram shows the varying angles of the 45 degrees. The varying angles are degrees of our physical conscious level connections, and although the angle degree changes numerically, there are still variants of the 8 different 45-degree angles. Okay. All right. And then we look at Stonehenge, which is aligned with specific constellations. And then galaxy potentials. Physical reality, what we can see and what we can't see based on vibration. Where we at for time? 52 minutes. Hope y'all still rolling with me because we're going to keep going for it. So, all right. So from this, it does get very complicated from here, and unfortunately would encompass a great amount of explanation to fill in the gaps. On extremely basic levels, you start from the beginning again with the layers of equal-sized cubes and spheres. See the layers of three-dimensional grid of the cube diagram below. Billions of these non-physical harmonic layers occupy the universe. They also stretch up and down in proportional sizes, but never intermix in the layers. Each layer would be different vibration and not to occupy